It kind of reminds me like when I got married in the Catholic Church, and we had to go through this thing called engaged encounter. And at engaged encounter, they asked us a lot of questions we hadn't resolved yet. Ones that we had talked about, like, do you want kids? How many kids? But then there were other questions that they brought up. It's like, oh, we actually had some argument through some of that because we hadn't really thought through it. But nice to get that ahead of time versus after. And, partnerships are a bit like a marriage, a business marriage. So a lot of them do end up in divorce, because they're just not clear. And Norm has told me multiple times, who's our chairman, he goes, hey, if it's the right partner, no agreement's going to matter. And if it's the wrong one, no agreement will do. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. Do you know what the best type of corporation is? Have you thought about starting a business but not quite sure where to start? Have you been working for someone else for so long that you just don't know what to do? Well, the question we have today is going to answer that and maybe even a little bit more. Chief of Staff Stova, what's up?
Hey, we got a question from Sarah today.
You're in a heck of a mood today. I can make you laugh with almost anything I say. It's great.
I don't know what it is. I woke up on the right side of the bed today. And it feels great.
That I told two jokes, and the clean one you thought was hilarious. The one that was just slightly a little more edgy, you're like, that one didn't quite reach out to you. It just shows our difference in personality.
I do love the dry, quirky, clean humor.
I want to start a band with my family called The Quirks. Because we like the Quirks. Yeah, like with my wife and my kids.
You'd be the guitarist.
Maybe I play bass so my other son could play guitar, but yeah, we'll see.
Who's going to be the lead singer?
We all would sing at different times.
Okay.
So yeah.
Stay tuned on a new episode for
keys, this. Roman on the drums,
I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah. So if you want to be in the band, let me know. It's called The Quirks.
The Quirks.
I want our first album to be called Love Bombs, and my wife says, could we be cheesier? I'm like, doesn't matter. Anyway, let's get to the question.
Okay. So the question today comes in from Sarah, and she is going back to massage therapy school after a 15-year break, and she's wanting to go out on her own instead of working within another business. And so she is curious about what business she should start for tax purposes. An LLC, is there another business type that would be best for her? She wants to make sure that she is protecting her personal assets. So what are her options as she's getting started? Okay,
first off, I'm not an attorney, but I'm going to play one on this podcast. No, so you got to consult an attorney before you take action on any of this, but let me give the basics. Mm-hmm. So a sole proprietor means that you don't have an entity and you take unlimited liability. The problem with being a sole proprietor is A, because of that unlimited liability, you put your assets at risk. Mm-hmm. B, you might minimize your tax benefits by being a sole proprietor. And C, you have a higher chance of getting audited. So I do recommend incorporating. I want you to do it in the proper manner, meaning jumping into it with, some service like LegalZoom, I don't love, because if you actually got sued, are you comfortable with what they set up? How boilerplate was it versus customized? I feel like sometimes free advice is some of the most expensive advice, or cheap advice is really cheap. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying, get an attorney from this, take it for what it's worth. But ultimately, here's the deal. An LLC is an amazing entity. It's kind of the new kid on the block, came out in the late 1970s in Wyoming. Now it's one of the most popular. It's the most popular form of setting something up. But beyond the sole proprietor, like if someone's actually doing something.
And what makes it one of the most popular these days?
Really, a lot of people can have ultimate flexibility in this. So not only is it easy, it's flexible. So you could say, I want to take a higher distribution than my business partner, right? Or you can choose to tax it like an S corporation with an S election, even though it's an LLC. So it provides that opportunity. And it's really inexpensive as well. C corporations have been a little bit more onerous and complicated in the past. C corporations have had other medical benefits that some of the other types of corporations haven't had, like a medical reimbursement account, retained earnings where you got to put money in a C corporation. You don't have to distribute it that year. You can kind of hold it over, where an LLC and S corporation are known as a pass-through entity. You know what a pass-through entity is?
I've heard you talk about it several times, yes.
We'll have you teach this part then. We'll just see if I'm a good teacher now.
The people want to hear from Gunderson.
So pass-through entity means you pay taxes on it that year, whether you pull the money out of the corporation or not.
Yeah.
So you got legal protection with it, liability, but it still comes to you individually on your tax forms. Or a C corporation, you pay some tax on the way in, and then you pay tax on the way out. So, there's still opportunities where when people have a lower income, C corporations could have less tax just because of the corporate tax rates.
What's considered a low income though?
Less than $50,000.
Okay.
Okay. So that's a good clarification. And in an LLC, one of the cool things I like is you can have a business partner in that, and you shield from each other's liability, and you can actually make it what's known as a Schedule K, which taxes as a partnership, which might be a benefit. Maybe one person wants to take more tax advantage that year. The other person wants to take more distribution. Maybe someone wants to take a sabbatical and take part of the year off. The other person wants to work, and you want to change how the income works. That's a really nice part of the LLC. Where the S Corp, I look more as like a cash cow business. Like you're the only owner in that business. Now, we saw someone that had a $20 million business with 5 partners in an S corporation, all equally at 20%. My question was, do you always want to pay yourselves equally, right, on the distributions? And at the moment, they said yes, but I could see that having problems down the road. So an S corporation, if you're the only owner, you want to take a salary that's reasonable plus a distribution. That distribution could differentiate your income. Or now some of that's 1099 and it avoids self-employment tax. That could be as high as 15.3%.
Yeah.
But even when it's maxed out, it's still at least 3.2% that you save just on how you pay yourself. So in her case, if she has no partner, an S Corp might make some sense. An LLC might be better if you have a partner, because even my LLC, I have my wife as a 1% partner because there's asset protection you can do there.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm ever sued, I lose. In our operating agreement, it says we can only take distributions with unanimous vote. So she could say, I'm not going to let Garrett take a distribution. And then all of a sudden, whoever's trying to get that money, they're just sitting there waiting for that money to come out, but it's not coming out of the LLC. Now, is that going to hold up every time? I don't know. But I look at asset protection, which she's asking about, as a hurdle race. If we put too many hurdles too close together, you can't jump them. You're just going to fall over. And that's what you're trying to do, is prevent the attorneys from actually wanting to go through or go to court and at best settle or go, I don't know how I'm going to get anything here.
Okay. So if Sarah wants to go into business with a partner, how does she go about determining how much of the business she gets versus her business partner? Do you have any advice on that?
That's a big question. And my first advice is, if you can avoid a formal partnership and have a trial run of, hey, we're just going to have a revenue agreement here, right? Paid for production, things like that. Test it out, because I once heard the only ship meant to sink was a partnership. Yeah. I've had partnerships that didn't work out in real estate and in a business acquisition that I did. And it's really painful. It's really painful.
Yeah.
So if you can do it without jumping into the partnership right away. Now, Wealth Factory is a partnership, but I worked with one of the people for 7 years before partnership, the other two for a couple of years before partnership. So we had to really kind of see how we operated together and how it would work out. And we did that in an LLC for the flexibility of it. So on payouts, distributions, how all those types of things work. So start, if you can have like a courtship, almost like dating, right? Have specific things that you get paid for and how they're paid out. And then from there, if you're going to go into a partnership, the operating agreement is essential. Operating agreement spells out how you're going to do things.
Yeah.
And that's that becomes part of the LLC.
Yeah. And that's not something you're going to get when you just go online and set up an LLC. Like having an attorney actually write it that's personalized to you is really important. Yeah.
There's one of our friends, Hugh, who has a partnership program that walks people on how to set that up and ask the questions. It kind of reminds me like when I got married in the Catholic Church, and we had to go through this thing called Engaged Encounter. And at Engaged Encounter, they asked us a lot of questions we hadn't resolved yet. Ones that we had talked about, like, do you want kids? How many kids? But then there were other questions that they brought up. It's like, oh, we actually had some argument through some of that because we hadn't really thought through it. But nice to get that ahead of time versus after. And, partnerships are a bit like a marriage, a business marriage. So a lot of them do end up in divorce, because they're just not clear. And Norm has told me multiple times, who's our chairman, he goes, hey, if it's the right partner, no agreement's going to matter. And if it's the wrong one, no agreement will do. Right? Because it's just business between two people. He and I worked for years with no formal agreement, just a handshake, because he knew who I was. I knew who he was. So, it's important who you're doing business with and the liabilities they bring to the table, not just the assets. All right, so we've covered a little bit of the different types of corporations and what if you're starting a business, what you could do in that. make sure you're profitable. Get to profitability. Don't start something that's just a hobby inside of some type of corporation. Make sure it's something that you're going to stick with. And then, it's great because there are tax advantages from differentiating income inside of an S Corp or taxing as a partnership and an LLC or, in a C corporation for lower levels of income. But now you've got just some of the basics around corporations as you're considering what you're going to do with your business.